Rob and Lisa made some really excellent points, and I think from an advocacy standpoint, there's a couple missing pieces too that I just would add to that. One is that I think when you hear some of these arguments about, oh, it's regressive, well, so is losing your job. I mean, that's a lot more regressive, or not having a job created here because we don't have the transportation infrastructure to support our growth plans here in this county. So there's a lot of kind of myth and reality going on here. Some of these arguments don't really hold up. There are a lot of things you can do if you're a low-income family and there's an increase in the gas tax. There's a number of things you can do. You can get a more fuel-efficient car. There's a lot of 20-year-old Toyotas still on the road that get 32 miles per gallon instead of your old Cadillac or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of things every citizen can do to adjust to higher costs of gasoline. So it's not as regressive as, say, an income tax that you either pay or go to jail. There's a lot of things that you can do to mitigate through your driving habits, where you live, where you work. A lot of things we can do to adjust to higher gasoline taxes, but there's a lot of social benefits that come from each of those steps. What's wrong with incentivizing more Marylanders to have more fuel-efficient cars and to drive less? I mean, those are the two social costs of raising the gas tax. Well, are they really costs, or are there more benefits than costs in each of those cases? There's huge economic benefits that I think far outweigh the costs, is the bottom line. But I think to make this case, the final piece I would add is you've got to also give people confidence that the money raised for transportation is going to be spent on transportation. Mm-hmm. And I think it's been really shameful over the years how frequently the General Assembly has raided the Transportation Trust Fund every time they wanted to avoid any really difficult fiscal decision making on the general fund. And I think the two need to be approached hand in hand. If you really want to make this happen, we've got to have some assurance, maybe with a constitutional amendment like we have, to guarantee a certain level of education funding. Why don't we, since the politicians have shown themselves completely incapable of solving this on their own, why don't we put in some safeguards to take the politics out of it? And indexing is one of those great things. And
He's
something
feisty,
that protects transportation funding from everybody sticking their finger in the cookie jar would be great improvements in my mind.
I wish we could make a monolithic decision as politicians, but the fact is, I mean, you have 47 senators who come from very different areas. And, the coalitions that I'm talking about, the advocacy to the legislators come from their constituents. And so if legislators feel that there's a more important need that they need to address in their respective districts, transportation is not going to be the priority for them. It is for, this is like preaching to the choir to Montgomery County legislators, because I would say, I mean, it may be 100%, if not, it's like 90% of the 32 state delegates and senators from Montgomery County all have supported, gas tax increases. Many have supported constitutional amendments to, ban or bar raiding the Transportation Trust Fund. So it is a hotter issue in Montgomery County. The challenge is in these other areas of the state where they're dealing with a host of other issues that have greater importance in their districts. How do you heighten transportation? How do you frame transportation as being an important issue in those districts? And that's the challenge. That's what we need to do. It's not so much advocacy to the legislator. If we get to the constituencies that they're listening to and hearing from and looking to get reelected by, that's where we need to build the coalition, and that's how we're going to make the change. And I'm going to do my part in the General Assembly to push and prod, and as a member of the Blue Ribbon Commission, to try to do the same thing. But it's going to take a lot more than myself and some of my other colleagues, Delegate Rice, who's going to be on the council at the local level, and others. It's going to take a broader coalition of reaching out to other areas of the state. That's what it's going to take.
I want to take another question
Sure.
or two. Sam, did you want to ask a question? If you'll stand up.
Sam Weaver, I'm a partner at Chevy Chase Acura and Chevy Chase Nissan, but also the chairman of the Maryland Auto Dealers Association. And I love the conversation on the gas tax because it really hasn't changed in quite some time. It's a flat 23.5 cents. And if anybody in this room believes that the fuel economy is going to get worse, they're crazy. Over the next 5 years, the Maryland fleet's going to improve by 30%. If we meet the CAFE standard that's federally mandated, 60 million fewer gallons are going to be consumed in the state of Maryland per year. And you take that times the 23.5%. My industry is in charge of, or collects, we're a tax collector for the state. We collect 6% excise tax. And we're going to exceed that next year as far as being the #1 contributor to the Transportation Trust Fund. Every one of those dollars comes from a Maryland resident. The gasoline tax, there are people, we transport commerce through our state. That tax is paid for by other than Marylanders, and that's important to point out. And if it was indexed for inflation 10 years ago or 20 years ago, we'd be flush with cash. We could build whatever we want to build. And it's important to point out that, well, actually, this is the selfish side. I love the Blue Ribbon Commission. I'm very disappointed that nobody from my industry is represented on this commission. And we will be the #1 contributor. And we have solutions.
Are you not allowed to join?
You're appointed. But anyway, with that said,
the legislation articulates the representation for the most part.
Write a strongly worded letter.
There's also opportunities to participate.
but and there is an opportunity from our industry to really be a part of the solution of this, because it all boils down to money. And you know, if we have a ton of money, we can build whatever we want. And everything is pointing to the budget constraints. And I would encourage the commission to look at all the contributors and see where improvements can be made. And I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with the governor, and he is a proponent of indexing. We could index that today with 0 increase. And if anybody believes that the gas price is going to go down back to $1.25 a gallon, I'd take that bet that it's not. And you know, there's a lot of opportunity here that I think a lot of people can play a part in.
Get your involvement.
But this lets you know what we're up against. So part of it is the horse trading, part of it is there aren't projects that people see are relevant. Part of it's just demagoguery too. So I got to testify after the Secretary's predecessor during the special session when the indexing, not increasing the gas tax, was proposed, but just indexing. The first question that was asked by the Joint Committee was, well, if we index it to, and I forget it's a construction index it was supposed to be pegged to. Well, if we index it to the construction index, that'll increase, won't it? And the Secretary said, yes. Well, that'll be expensive. He said, well, it'll only be as expensive as it needs to be to keep pace with the types of projects we're going to pay for. But that's the first question. So, I mean, but the demagoguery is that we don't want to, well, we of course can't raise taxes. And so whether there was a benefit to the community or not was irrelevant, because they want to be able to go back and say, well, see, I didn't raise your taxes. And I think the important part is to be able to go back to communities and say, you're right, you didn't, but you don't have any of the transportation projects that you need within your community either. And to some degree, it's a challenge that we have within this region. Fortunately, we're actually better off than the state of Virginia, where, I mean, you can kind of draw the line in Northern Virginia as to where you're for stuff, and then once you cross it, where you're against stuff, even though most of Northern Virginia is paying for things that fund the entire rest of the state. We have the same situation here. Most of the jurisdictions that don't want to provide resources here get far more benefit from state resources than we do on a per capita basis. So we've got a lot of legwork to do there, but part of it is just to overcome some of the demagoguery too, because there's a lot of that out there.